And Anna, you are on.
Wonderful. Great. Let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So, thank you all so much, and thank you, Nov, for inviting me here today to tell you a little bit about Merjan and what we do. My name is Anna Strasshofer. I know that's a mouthful. It's German. And I'm here to talk to you today about how we can harness the power of virtual reality for essential human skills. There's a lot of other terminology out there for what human skills are, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how Merjan thinks about human skills and why they're the most essential skills right now in the workplace. So a little bit about Merjan is that we are a virtual reality company that exists to improve human interactions. We actually started in the education space. We were a research project out of the University of Central Florida. The whole idea behind Merjan was that initially started and funded the research, actually funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, was to give teachers the opportunity to practice classroom management and behavior management with students, as well as their interactions with their colleagues and principals, as well as the parents of their students. We realized that there was just a huge gap between learning for educators, and these are such high stakes interactions when you're with children, and teaching them at such a vulnerable and highly developmental stage in their life, that the teachers were just not getting enough of the practice and the actual real world application of what they're learning in the classroom or in their in the education and higher education. So Merjan was created to give teachers that safe practice space to apply those teaching skills with virtual avatars. So here's a first view of what our environments look like and all of the areas that we have since expanded over the last 4 years. We realized that the skills that teachers need, which is leadership, collaboration, facilitation, de-escalation, conflict resolution, these are universal skills that apply anywhere across the board. And we have since expanded greatly, especially in the last year, in the enterprise and healthcare and defense space. Everything from frontline leaders and workers, customer service agents, all the way up to, high-level executive leadership and coaching and strategic decision making. So. Just to back up a little bit, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the soft skills gap that's going on in the market right now. I think that most of us here probably agree and are aware of the external factors happening that is causing this demand, and that these skills are really difficult to find right now. And just to pull two important numbers here is that, hiring managers, 58% are saying that the lack of soft skills among job candidates is limiting their company's productivity. And that is estimated to be an annual economic cost of $81 billion in the US by 2025. So, we need, and I would say also that skills acquisition is, and especially of these complex skills, these human skills. These are skills that are not going to be replaced with artificial intelligence and all of the disruptors and innovations that are happening at work and for productivity and engagement. These are the skills that are really going to have the longest shelf life, and they're the most urgently needed. Most urgently needed now and will be in the next 5 to 10 years. We know that the path to mastery of these complex areas, such as problem solving, leadership development, emotional intelligence, those can take an entire career to really hone and develop. And frankly, we're running out of time. We don't have that time anymore. So We need to use and leverage the best in technology, the best in artificial intelligence to really enhance that human social intelligence and emotional intelligence in the workplace, and overall become a more productive and higher performing organization and ecosystem. So when we talk about soft skills and human skills, you know, what I'm really referring to and what Merjan really focuses on is meaningful conversations. It is the essence of what interpersonal skills have to offer. And when you have those deep, and this is from Evan Sinar from the Hard Science of Soft Skills, you know, having deeper and more extensive interactions with employees is not just a common leader preference, but it needs to be a core value for successful companies. Sorry about that. A lot of the times we are seeing a lot of inconsistency, and I am bending a little bit towards talking about leadership and management, but this is really across the board with all levels and all areas of where Merjan can benefit, you know, sales or customer service. But when we talk about managers, there's so much inconsistency that is happening in the day-to-day, and it really varies your engagement with your employees, the coaching that employees are getting in the moment, and it's honestly creating a lot of waste in resources and time and productivity. And you need to think, if you can hone those moments that you engage with your employees and how do you make them the most productive and the most meaningful conversations that you can? And when you have that high, if you lower that variance, you're going to have more consistency across the board and be able to impart knowledge better and have better succession planning for your workforce. And a lot of data on soft skills, which is, there's not a lot out there. It's very hard to quantify, which is also where Merjan comes in. We're really trying to open that performance capacity into our into that workforce and in that area of those conversations. And it has been shown that the highest correlation with positive leadership is, and the largest positive correlation to that is empathy. And I'm gonna show you a little bit of why empathy is so important in a few minutes. But I also just wanted to share that there is a positive business impact that I had mentioned earlier about lowering this variation. And here are some numbers: is that, you know, they can be trained, and that those that organizations that do soft skills training can have a return of investment of $4,000 for almost every $1,000 spent on soft skills. Like, that's a pretty big number, but it's, how do you uncover that? How do you really see that and realize that? So when we look at the training space, there's a huge array of options, more than that's on this range or spectrum here. You have, and they usually go from very human to human, not scalable, so role play and coaching. These are typically events that you know, take away from time at work, and you're spending time doing role plays with coaches or other peers or other managers. However, and then at the other end, you have your e-learning courses, your adaptive learning, branching games, and simulations where you're clicking through and making decisions. However, out of that, you're not really getting the learning by doing, the practical application, which we know is really important. It also, the more AI and technology that you use for this, or e-learning that is used for soft skills training, is you're also lowering that practical application and that human empathic element to it. So human and emotional intelligence, which is so highly required for learning soft skills. And Sorry about that. And we know that if you're in an instructor-led training and you are talking about soft skills, that's not really going to move the needle on performance either. If you're just going through an e-learning module, there's so much more that is missing here. Just like these nonverbals, listenings, and speaking that really needs to happen when you're trying to learn interpersonal skills and practice interpersonal skills. This is something that you really can't practice without actually doing it and applying it. So going back to our spectrum here is, role play is one of the many ways that we have to actually work on that. However, we have taken those the essence of how role play can work, but we feel like we at Merjan make it a much better and more effective way to do role plays. And the way that we do that, I'm sorry about that. Oh, and sorry, this is a little fun photo of just like, this is what I think of every time that I think about role play is, you're usually in a situation where it's awkward, you're feeling uncomfortable, there's psychological and sociological phenomenons at work that is preventing you from being able to really buy into this emotionally and feel like a situation, like a typical role play, is real. There's a lot of great role plays out there that you can do, but it requires an immense amount of authenticity and what you call plausibility and place illusion. So how you create the environment around the role play so that it's going to be actually authentic and relevant to that learner. And there's a lot that goes into it. And typically when you're doing role plays, that this is not achieved. So the way that Merjan works is we take the best in that human interaction that happens with role play and we put it in virtual reality and deliver simulations for learners to practice difficult conversations. This can be done in both a 2D and 3D format. You're going to see it today. And the advantage of using this is you're using the best in that AI piece, which is collecting data, understanding, being able to reduce the cognitive load and lower those barriers to suspension of disbelief and and create a psychologically safe space for the learner to actually practice these challenges, and they're personalized and occur in real time. You can also immediately after that the simulation, you can be classified into classify their performance through assessment, and also learners can get some immediate qualitative reflection and feedback on how that interaction went. So just giving a little bit of a preview of what we're about to see is what an immersion environment really can look like and what an interaction can look like. As you can see up on the top right, we have our customer service environment, which we've been working with Best Western Hotels, and where the participant on the right is interacting with the avatar who is portraying an angry customer who's coming with a complaint. And in that moment, there is a human operator that's behind the avatar and driving and pushing the learner in a way that could never be done in role play, because it's a very, they can really push them and be uncomfortable and be upset, and you're never going to ruin that relationship if it were with a colleague or something like that. Again, it places the learner in a place and to feel that it's really authentic. And part of that authenticity is having that human and emotional piece. So everyone asks, why humans driving avatars? And that's because we know artificial intelligence isn't there yet to have a complete conversation about, giving feedback or doing a performance evaluation with an employee. And you have to have that human in the loop. However, you can scale it and make it more agile if you use virtual reality. So there's those three main points is, the consistency is you're using a space where you can give a standardized performance, and you can trace and track that performance. The next is the impact, is that really hyper real feeling and having that authentic emotional connection in the situation and trying to solve that problem. And then finally is actually cost effectiveness. This is the most cost effective way to give learners the opportunity to practice these types of situations over and over again. So I hope I haven't lost you guys too much. I know that I've probably talked a lot and jumped around to a couple different areas. And I want to, give Corey the opportunity in just a moment here to see what this simulation stress test is like. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now, if that's okay with everyone. Yep, go ahead now.
I'm going to move this over to Laura.
Wonderful.
There we go. So she should have the control.
Yeah, and I will say that Laura, who my colleague on today, I'm sorry I didn't introduce her. She is a simulation specialist with Merjan who delivers these simulations every day and has the ability to portray any avatar and drop in today to have this discussion with us. So is Corey there?
I'm here.
Great, wonderful.
Let me bring up my camera.
Yep, I can see you, and I'm sure.
Now, before we proceed, let me make sure that everyone else is seeing both Corey's video and, if you will, the gentleman on the screen, the avatar.
Yes, I see it.
Looks good. Okay, we're good. Thank you. All right, here we go. You're on.
So, hello, Corey. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
Great. So my name is Ben, and I'm going to be your host avatar. What's going to happen next is I will share a screen with you, and it's going to be a slide, actually. I'm going to read through it and then see if you have any questions, all right?
Sounds good.
Okay. So one of your employees, Linda, is generally effective. She's smart, dedicated, and passionate about her work. Recently, she's responded with hostility towards some team members. You've witnessed it in several team meetings. You also just heard that Linda frequently loses her patience with her colleague Steve when trying to solve problems quickly. Your objectives are to actively listen to her concerns, ask open-ended questions to learn more about the situation, check that Linda understands how her behavior affects other team members, and motivate her to take concrete steps to improve interactions with her peers. Do you have any questions about those objectives?
No, makes sense.
Okay, great. So Corey, what's going to happen next is I will disappear and Linda will appear in these chairs. She can see you and hear you in real time. At any time you can say pause or end simulation. I'll return and we'll do a reflection on your experience. You don't have to complete the meeting. As soon as you've gotten a sense, you can just say pause at any time, all right?
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, Corey. How are you?
Good.
Good. So
well,
wanted
welcome.
to see me?
Yes. I noticed that over the last couple of meetings, especially when you're with Steve, there have been some interactions that have been a bit of a concern. From your perspective, have you noticed that? What sort of things do you think have been happening?
Well, what's been happening is Steve has been really dropping the ball. I've been picking it up, putting in 150%, and I finally just gave him some direct feedback right, at the end of our meeting.
And do you feel that calling him out in the middle of a meeting is appropriate, that it achieved what you wanted to have
Interesting.
happen?
I didn't call him out. I gave him direct feedback. I think we could be talking about, well, how come Steve is dropping the ball and I'm put in that position?
Yeah, and we can get to that. I just wanted to get some more information from you about what sort of, some of the backstory on your side of it before we started getting into the incident or the situation that happened during the staff meeting.
Okay, well, so Corey, Steve and I, as you know, we've been working with a really high stakes external client, McManus, and I have to give Steve credit. He's been doing a great job. But the other day, they wanted something done last minute, and it pretty much fit in the work that Steve had been doing. But anyways, he was not responsive. I ended up doing it. And then at the meeting, he was saying how happy they were and what a great job that he had done when he had dropped the ball. And that's when I gave him the direct feedback.
So it sounds like you feel like he took credit for your work.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
And not only did he take credit for it, it was when he dropped the ball. So it just was very frustrating to me.
So it sounds like because you had done the work, he didn't acknowledge it, he took credit for it, even though you had asked him for it, that you're feeling frustrated with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what sort of things have you tried working with him on in order to, have you had a chance to talk to him about your thoughts and feelings in a more private setting as opposed to something a bit more public?
Well, right then I was so frustrated. I did give him the feedback, at the end of the meeting. So to be honest with you, Corey, we've been having some issues communicating for a couple of months now. He's really indirect. He wants me to be all smiley and chit-chatty and let's talk about your lunch. I don't have time for that. It feels kind of sexist the way he wants me to be all indirect and sweet.
Well, I can understand how you would feel annoyed and upset based upon his behaviors. So some of it is what we can do to sort of address and work with Steve. But I think part of my concern is also how do we address when you start feeling frustrated and upset, especially at a particular meeting, in a public setting, how can we help work through that frustration at the moment and then be able to pick it up after that sort of emotion has passed? And, part of it is, when that sort of behavior happens, it kind of comes off sort of poorly on you and not so much Steve. So I just want to make sure that we can come up with solutions and address issues like that. So, it comes off as positive that you're seeing that we can address the issues, but do it in a more productive way. Is that something that would make sense for you?
Yeah, I would like that because I'm just struggling with Steve right now, and I'm putting in 150% going above and beyond, and to think that that's being perceived, that I'm not being perceived in a good light, it's upsetting to me. Plus, I'd like to work better with Steve. Maybe the three of us could just have a check-in meeting.
Yeah, and I agree that that's probably a good step. I think part of me, what I can do to help you is talk to Steve, pull him aside, kind of share that, and then we can meet together and talk about the situation, what we can do to help, close that up. So, kind of get his side of things. I've heard your side of things, and then we can meet together to kind of work through other ways to address and resolve those sort of concerns. Does that sound like a plan?
Okay. Well, that does sound like a plan, Corey. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Simulation.
Pause simulation.
Yeah. Great job. And we don't have to do the feedback. Bennett's back here today.
Okay,
He usually would like to ask, what you get that immediate guided reflection that I mentioned afterwards. But because Corey, we just threw you in the deep end there, probably may have forgotten what your objectives were, and it's really meant for something just to show what the scenarios in the simulation is capable of. But I do want to ask you, what your thoughts of the experiences was and what it felt like going through that just now.
Yeah, I think the objectives of the technology hit really kind of that that area that you're concerned about. It's like if it were a real person in front of you in sort of a tradition, it's like a classroom setting, or you're trying to work through it, there is that sort of risk of, oh, I know this person, I work with this person, or, how they're going to think of me when I'm trying to develop a skill set that I'm not comfortable with. I think this is a great environment to do that. So for me, I thought it was really valuable, and it'd be great to like go through it. Get some notes, get some feedback, run through it again, kind of repurpose, retask, restructure some of the conversations. Like, I know I was headed for a cliff on some of these, and being able to go, how can I avoid, walking near that, and kind of focus on the behavior would certainly help a lot. So I think this is a great tool. I think has a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said, that frequent practice, being able to go in and do this and try this again, also really hard to do in a traditional role play setting. It's like usually it's a one and done event, and what you really need is frequent practice. And this is the ability for people to sign in from anywhere they are and be able to practice this and get that feedback immediately after. I also just want to add or just share one more thing. You do not have to do any more interacting right now, but I want to share that, there's 2 chairs here, and we can have, if you had come to the conclusion of having Lee and Linda having some sort of mediation conversation, you can have a series of scenarios where you actually run that conflict resolution. So, hey Lee, hey Linda, how are you doing today?
Okay, how about yourself, Anna?
I mean, I'm doing all right. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm bringing us
Me too. I'm really tired of this. That's what I have to say.
Hey.
I know, Linda. I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna
and Rocco's
get
smashing
some work
start.
done.
Yes. Go ahead and get your phone out. But yes, the idea is you can build because you have that human in the loop, and you're not spending thousands of hours and millions of dollars of trying to put in pre-programmed AI responses that would still come out as very inauthentic and not emotionally intelligent. You can build any scenario you want around the specific performance objectives that you need your learners to move the needle on. So here, these are the objectives for that scenario you just had is, actively listening, asking open-ended questions, and trying to motivate your employee to think about her behavior and take ownership and make concrete next steps to improve that behavior. So you build the scenario around those objectives. So I just wanted to, we are not, our expertise is delivering fantastic simulations, really not hyper real avatars, but to a certain level of naturalism where you can see those nuanced micro expressions and gestures, and be able to read those nonverbals in addition to the verbals, and have that interaction. And you can build scenarios. I'm going to go ahead, and Corey, you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Corey. You did a fantastic job. And I also wanted to share a little bit of the examples of leadership content. So I'm going to take my screen back. There we are. There we go.
And in the meantime, Anna, do you want to take any questions at this point, or still take it all the way to the end?
Questions, yeah. That's what I'm all about.
Okay. Well, so let me open it up to the group at this juncture. I know that this, just seeing the demo again for myself, raised a couple of questions, let's just say observations, which I may say for the feedback section. But any questions from the audience that you'd like to ask either Anna, Laura, or for that matter, Corey?
Hey, this is Steve Sikora. I got a question.
Sure, go for it.
So I'm curious as to why you decided to go with CGI and avatars instead of actually just having it as a Skype feed where you actually see the full range of human emotion. One of the things I did notice that was kind of distracting for me was the audio feed and the video feed didn't seem to match up, and that was just a little distracting for me. So why the idea of the CGI instead of just doing a live person?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve was your name, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Hi,
Steve.
Steve. Okay, so yeah, that is a great question, and I will say that GoToWebinar, because we are running our software through the webinar, there is a lag that's happening between the voice and the movement of the lip syncing that's happening. That's AI driven. So between what and what is coming out of the sim specialist's mouth in real time. So the reason for that lag is purely because of the GoToWebinar platform and interface, rather than we use another, we have a workaround for another screen sharing platform that has a much higher frame rate than GoToWebinar. This cannot be done on like a WebEx or BlueJeans or anything like that. The avatars would not be, they would freeze up and move like at least with the GoToWebinar, they have fluid movements. And so again, the reason why we use avatars instead of a real person that is just on a webcam is we actually have a number of reasons for that. And one of them is that that barrier to suspension of disbelief and actually buying into this. It's counterintuitive. This is a question that we get a lot. It was my first question when I first saw this technology is, why the avatars? And not only does it it scales the ability for the role player or the simulation specialist to drop into any role that would meet any demographic, or if you want them to look like your customers or something like that, you have the ability to easily find and grab whatever avatar you want, because we have a huge bank of I think 30 adults right now, and that's going to be growing by next year to at least 100 different options of different types of populations. Another is also that ability, like I said, where we had Lee and Linda in the same room together, and you have one person that is orchestrating the entire thing. So instead of having to have 3 individual people, you have one person who's able to drive the whole interaction. And then finally, the last piece is really the research that we have, that we did a comparison, and there's a lot actually out of Stanford's virtual human interaction lab about the use of human-mediated avatars versus physical agents, or like a video role play. And like I said, it's a little counterintuitive, but people are able to emotionally buy into this more, because I think it's part of that it's part of that psychological safety, but it also gamifies the experience, and you're able to take a lot more data, and because there's AI that's enhancing the sim specialist role, it reduces their cognitive load as well. So
that's interesting.
Do you have any other questions or like concerns about that?
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Hi, this is Roy. I'm just wondering, is this a bridge to when AI is at the point where they can be autonomous actors? Or is this really, the idea, like what you said, that it's the avatars just kind of give it a sense of unreality that's kind of helpful?
Can you rephrase? Anyway, I think I know what you're asking. Can you just repeat that again, or can you rephrase that?
Yeah. So is the end goal? You mentioned at the beginning, the technology of AI is not there yet to have avatars that react like humans the way the avatarization of the actors appeared in this simulation. So is the end goal to actually have autonomous AI driving the avatars?
Okay, got it. So And that's a really, really great question. And I think that there is a lot of differing views on it in the VR space and industry. I think a lot of our competitors and other VR options out there that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to they're trying to drive to that goal. My personal feeling is that we're trying to improve human interactions. And if we want to improve human interactions, we need to practice interactions with other humans. And I don't see us trying anytime soon, trying to pour the amount of investment and energy it takes. And we are multiple paradigm shifts away for AI to be able to do this, by the way. A lot of investment would go into this. And I mean, just as an example, the IBM debating machine was a team of 60 people and millions of dollars with no real business outcome in mind. And I think it took like 15 years on the project to do, to be able to have a debate about public education. And it was the discrete, and still the human won that debate, because it still didn't have all of the emotional intelligence and being an executive presence in order to really influence and motivate and captivate that audience. So for me, the role of AI, the AI will continue to enhance, and there will be more AI driving the simulation. But I think that the human, the conversation, the actual interaction needs to be human to human. But where AI can be leveraged is, and machine learning, is pulling data and being able to find patterns and identify areas for those learners to improve.
So how does it do that?
What are your thoughts?
So it measures. I'm sorry. So it measures the responses of the avatars and turns those into actionable metrics.
Yeah, I think that's more of the direction of where our software is going and where our overall vision is going.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? About what other people think about, like, trying to make AI more emotionally intelligent. Like, is it really worth it from a business perspective? Is it really, or do we just scale that human by leveraging technology to scale the human to be able to give opportunities for learners to have those that frequent repeated practice and consistent practice?
I would love to hear the thoughts of the Technology Review Council. I certainly have an observation or two, but let me hold off on that and see if we've got other input from others out there. Anyone want to volunteer some thoughts to Anna's question?
Just a additional question in terms of languages that can be utilized within this program.
Yeah, we actually have. So I will say that we have two different models for the way that you can utilize Merjan, and one is outsourcing the simulation specialist. We operate like a call center. Like, you can sign up and schedule a time for a simulation, like an appointment, or you can, at a large enough scale, we can be on demand, where learners can just sign in through our portal and be put in a queuing system until they're linked up with one of our simulation specialists. The other option is we can give you the license to this technology, and we can share with you how to drive these avatars. So our staff right now has, I think, we can do like 3 or maybe 4 to 5 different languages, but I will say we're in about 15 different countries, and they have that license, and they are doing the simulations in their own native language with their own native simulation specialists and speakers.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Anna, if you don't mind, let me toss a couple of things, unless someone else has got a comment. In a general sense, you're actually taking us away from the questions to more of the feedback, but it seems to be an appropriate place. So I want to say that Merjan is a great example of what I'm seeing more and more today when I'm talking to new technology vendors. They're providing a platform of service with usually quite some new approach to the technology. but they're finding at the back end a human interaction of some sort is really a service within the platform that really makes it very unique and very differentiating, i.e. what Merjan does with their coaches sitting there as a human in interacting with you. But I'm seeing that as being a fairly quick situation. When I look at what AI is doing these days, my perspective, and it may or may not be on your roadmap, but I would suspect that since you're doing this and probably recording these, or at least should be recording many of these and sharing them with companies, but keeping the recordings or snippets of it to be able to go through there and say, what were the typical questions in this kind of scenario that could potentially have prompted Corey to ask? In other words, they may not have come naturally from him, but kind of being coached. And that's where I think AI makes a huge difference, is it's saying in previous examples of this kind of situation, these kinds of responses, that this was successful kind of questioning or lines of questioning. That's one thing. And then the perspective of the AI, really, whatever we end up doing with AI, it truly is going to always take a human in there. I guarantee that. I'm a very firm believer of that. But I am curious, Anna and Laura, from your standpoint, the perspective of whether or not, many of you probably saw in that demonstration, a lot of visual clues, crossing of arms, crossing of legs, leaning forward, leaning back, tone of voice, words being chosen by Laura to have spoken by the avatar. All those things are really good stuff. Are those things that potentially could be keyed off of let's say, an AI perspective based on my interaction? In other words, no, you're saying these things. I'm not seeing you, but I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing the words you're doing. So maybe I'm going to start being either tougher or easier based on the way in which you're delivering your message or asking me things. Is that something, a possibility that comes across?
Yeah, great questions. The first, to your first question, the first step is recording and being able to have that traceable asset. So these are recorded interactions where, as you saw in, I had showed you a clip of what those recordings look like, and you have a little window of what the individual learners' nonverbal cues, and that it's actually them as the learner instead of making them an avatar. So you can actually look at their gestures and micro expressions, their eye contact, things like that. The next step would then be, having AI running through and collecting data on that interaction, and then being able to classify performance and recommend additional practice in certain areas and things like that. And then to a little bit, which goes into your next question, is yes, that is definitely where the AI is going more and more with every update. Even since when the technology was founded, there's a lot more that's happening without triggering or intervention from the simulation specialist, where they're really just focusing on the conversation piece and not triggering those reactions and movements and things like that. So that is like becoming increasingly more AI driven. And the next aspect of that also is and I'm sorry, no, the last part of that was about AI driving those reactions and the level of challenge, and that goes more into the scenario design process, is telling the simulation specialist or avatar how they are supposed to react if the learner is going off course a little bit. So if we want, actually, we can do another interaction, and if someone wants to do an example of a bad job there, and see how you can escalate that. But yeah, you can definitely change those levels in escalation, but I think it's more in the scenario design process of how the avatars are instructed to react if they're hitting or missing those objectives. Does that answer your question?
I think it's Very nicely done. I'm looking in the chat box, and there is a question here, so let me read it out to make sure I'm giving the right sense of it.
The window.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the question is that you mentioned Best Western as a client, and so are there any other cases or clients or examples that you could, and I'm sure there are many, but let's go through that.
This, for example, is a scenario around workplace safety culture, actually, but Athena Health is a great case study example of how they're using us for leadership development courses. They were having, because of the very matrixed organizational structure of the health systems and the healthcare field, Athena Health is which is a provider of, I think, electronic health records management or something like that. They need to be able to influence others without authority, and they had a huge class around this area, and it was something like an 8 to 10 hour lecture, and where the instructor just basically stood up there and talked to them about this influence model and how to influence others without authority. There would be some light role playing, but overall the course was not very popular. It was not, it had poor NPS because people didn't really think they walked away with any new insights. But we have, their CLO had seen Merjan, and one of their project designers had actually seen us in the teaching space when they were getting their master's in Boston, and saw the technology used for educators. And when she came to Athena Health, said, I found this great technology where we can really bring this influence model to life. And they have completely changed the way this course runs, and something like 3 hours or 4 hours of the instructor-led training piece has been now replaced with a 10-minute simulation, and has been proven to be more effective. It's been more engaging, and has improved it is now the most popular course that their Athena University has, and is constantly getting filled. So that's one example there.
And if I could maybe ask another question on the heels of that came from the same individual, and that is, how many different types of scenarios have you developed vis-a-vis that about like a dissatisfied client on the phone for a customer service versus disgruntled employee, more supervisory, internalized?
So we doing?
Yeah, I would say just kind of go through your case studies, but kind of looking at the kinds of cases or studies, or I'm sorry, scenarios that you're building.
Absolutely. I'd say like the biggest growing area for us right now is in leadership development and managers. We just recently, we are going to be training 5,000 of T-Mobile's branch managers. They came to us because they said, look, our branch managers are young. Some of them are in college or not even in school, and they lack they hire based on that. They have the heart, but they don't have the skills. So we are going to be working with them on how they can build rapport and trust. I would say the main buckets of where our scenarios are, and we have a number, hundreds of scenarios we've created, maybe more than that, probably thousands. And if you talk about especially our education space, which has been, I think we have about 150 clients in that area. So we are, and Nov, I just realized that I had plugged in my computer and the plug I'm using is not broken, so is not working. So I hope that I do not drop
die out on this.
But anyway,
I can see an IT, my computer is failing scenario being written right now.
Yes. So I want to say that our biggest growing area is leadership development, and those being in collaboration with employee relations groups that are also folding in fostering inclusiveness and diversity discussions and diverse thought. how to address micro inequities and microaggressions that occur in the workplace. I'd say that's our biggest growing area, but I'd say like our probably highest business outcome case study is in the customer service space. So when we did this problem resolution scenario and training program for the front desk agents, for all 25,000 of them, halfway through the training, they took a test of their NPS of the hotels that had the training and those that hadn't. Best Western and other and the hospitality industry live and breathe and die by their NPS, their Net Promoter Score. And just within 6 months of starting that training with us, they had seen that every hotel that had gone through the training had some sort of increase in their problem resolution and overall customer satisfaction, some in the double digits. And they had equated that every point gained in NPS per hotel is an additional 12,000 in revenue for that particular property. So they've been with us for 3 years, and even to this day, with so much changing in the hospitality area, this is a very important training program that really shows the business results that they need in their market.
Good deal.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Any other questions, or we have a few minutes, and I certainly would ask if you've got feedback for Anna and Laura about your, just not questions so much, but just general relevancy, like, don't like, whatever it is. We've always had very candid and very thoughtful feedback, so feel free to please share that at this juncture. Anyone? They're being a respectful and quiet crowd.
Oh,
well, then I'll start us.
I do have some feedback.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think being able to measure the outcomes is really critical. I mean, one of the problems that we have in HR is measuring things. And in analytics, we live and breathe on metrics. And a lot of what we measure is kind of like what I call active measurement, basically surveys. So now we're kind of creating work in order to measure work. And so any way, you could be kind of have like passive measurement of human interactions. You're providing data for all sorts of other good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I really, this is Steve again. I really like that this creates kind of a social sandbox, and it creates a repetitive nature. I think one of the things that I see that tends to be ineffective in a training environment is the concept of one and done. And I can see how this software would have that ability to rerun the same scenario, and the candidate or whoever's the trainee going through it can switch things up. They can do it, and they can get that repetitive piece at going through it so that it really sinks in, because a lot of the other training is you do it once, you've got your completion certificate, and then do you really use it, or do you ever go back to it? And this looks like it has replay value.
And I would add to that saying that not only, the one and done just fundamentally doesn't work. That sounds like what you were hearing anyway, but on top of it, you'd be able to send out refresher scenarios. These are the most common feedback items we're hearing about. So here's a refresher scenario on how to handle it. Doing that on a regular basis all of a sudden embeds this as a part of the normal routine, as opposed to the off-site or in a separate room or anything like that. It becomes much more relevant, especially to that fresh out of college front desk guy at the hotel. And that's hugely problematic. And I can imagine, my son-in-law is an inspector for a major hotel chain, and he tells me horror stories. And this would be outrageously successful in a kind of scenario like that.
I have a question. How does this tie in? So, like the refresher courses, is this standalone? How do I go about scheduling? Like, I want this person to go through this training, but in 60 days a refresher, and in 6 months another, session.
Yeah. Great question. Absolutely. So we do these. We are not like we don't reach out to individual consumers, so they would have to be under, you know, a project or
LMS,
program within their organization. But yeah, everyone essentially gets a link to be in our portal, and they can we can open up the windows of time that they need to schedule that time, that they're supposed to be scheduling that time. That's exactly a pilot that we just did with Nationwide Insurance. They do a fantastic in-person on-site training. You know, lots of role plays, like it's a boot camp, but you know, what happens 30 days after that boot camp? And they want to make sure that that retention is still there and that they've retained what they took, and have, you know, still have those takeaways and are using the skills that they learned, and that they're still relevant. So they are, once that training is finished, they get put into you know, they have 30 days to finish and schedule on their own in a self-paced fashion, schedule on their own their first simulation, and then another follow-up simulation within 60 days. And depending on what the skill set is that they need, it might be up to 4 simulation sessions. Our research, the initial research that came from University of Central Florida, showed that 4 10-minute simulations actually changed a behavior and transferred in the workplace.
And do you feed that information back to the people who are scheduling? So, you know, 3 months comes up, you know, a course goes out. How does it get fed back so that I know that it's been done?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can do, it depends on what, you know, LMS you use. There's thousands out there, but this is, we take very little personal identification information about except their name and their email. So the recording of that MP4 of the recording of the actual simulation, and you know, the fact that they completed it, depending on what level you needed, what level of information you need, we can feed that back to you in like a CSV. It lives in the portal, but it can be exported.
Got it. And then sort of a related question. I know these are sort of dynamic simulations, but is there a way to like evaluate how well they did? Like, you know, there's 4 areas where they need to be able to demonstrate, you know, a certain level of skill, that there's an assessment at the end of it that I mean, it's sort of the gamification of it to kind of follow this out. Like if I'm supposed to be hitting 10 out of 10 on these behaviors, but I'm, you know, I get 10 out of 1, you know, on one, and then, you know, this area I really need to work on. Is that the sort of feedback that also gets fed back to the person going through the simulation?
It can, yes, it can be. I will say that, you know, you will get that immediate, the learner gets that qualitative feedback, which, and I always say, like, I always say this in my presentations, like, the learners don't really care about the score, but the learning managers do. So the learners really want actionable next steps of how can I do this better? Where can I improve? And the avatar can give that feedback to the learner, and also with that recording, you can have managers or coaches review that, and it makes the coaching conversation that you have with a manager or a coach more meaningful and productive, because it's not like, what would you do in this situation? It's, hey, you know, let's watch this simulation of how, you know, and talk about how we did and how I could do it better. The assessment piece, you know, you need to validate and standardize and make sure those assessments are validated. So that's my only piece that I would say beforehand, like to really think about, is like, you need to validate the assessment before rolling that out. But yes, we do it for very high stakes simulations, ones that require, that make or break someone's career, literally, like they can't become
sexual
a teacher
harassment.
or get the license that they need, or to be a teacher or to be a therapist, without having passed that simulation through our assessment. But that went through a very rigorous validation process to validate that assessment.
Okay.
In shall we say, honoring everybody's time, I will keep this open, and Anna and Laura, if you have the time, we'll just let folks either stay, or if they have to leave, certainly. Again, my appreciation to all of you who have attended. As always, thank you very much for the support of the Technology Review Council. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have
and my contact information is here.
Yep.
Sorry, Anna.
Or you can reach me if you need to, and I'll get you in touch with Anna with no problem. So, So I'm kind of curious about just this perspective about where the product can go in a general sense. And my feeling is, as much as we would like to see a B2B situation, do you have plans for a B2C, i.e., people who are maybe not getting the soft skills training that they feel that they would need, have read about it, would like to practice it?
Yeah.
Is there any thoughts about going down that route?
There are, and we're definitely, actually yesterday I went out to dinner with a new, one of our many consultants that we have. We're a very small company, but we are growing immensely. You know, this year we secured $8 million in funding, and we are thinking about, you know, where this is going on a large strategy. So like I had mentioned before, we're not the content experts. What we create is fantastic simulations with great avatars. And that's, I think, what our bread and butter is. And I think it's really up to the content experts to build out the scenarios. However, you know, we are definitely bringing on some subject matter experts to talk about, should we have a bank of scenarios and make that off the shelf for any consumer that can come and schedule it on their own. At this point, we are still doing, you know, project to project basis, and we tweak the scenarios. Even the ones that we have that are off the shelf now, they're usually tweaked to make it more contextual and relevant to the business and to the learners.
Yeah, exactly. And then also the perspective, it strikes me, and for those of you in this audience that are still with us, that are sitting in a position where they could influence their corporate thinking, I think that this is a tool for boards, for board governance, for board problem resolution, for training the chairperson as the facilitator, how to handle, you know, a board of CEOs is not a great board, to tell you the truth. Everybody's got an opinion and nobody wants to take anyone else's perspective. So I see things like this really helping to even out and create team building in ways that we really haven't thought that through. So it's not necessarily the perspective of dealing with a problem employee. It may be, how do I facilitate a meeting with some diversity of opinions, strong personalities, etc. How can I be effective as a leader and facilitator? So I see you guys as sitting on a platform that has a great deal of possibilities.
Yeah, this is definitely used both in a private practice fashion as well as for peer-to-peer social learning. Actually, a lot of people use it in a workshops type model, because also this is such a brand new type of learning and very, it's a brand new modality of learning. It's a very different approach, and people are caught off guard. There is that first element of surprise that, you know, surprising learners is always really great, but it gets them comfortable with the technology when they're helping each other, and then they can have that additional private practice on their own as well.
Needless to say, I will say that the audience I was speaking to, they were mesmerized by the screen. I had to bring their attention back to me as a speaker to hear what I had to say after that. So it is an impactful perspective. Did anybody have questions or other observations they'd like to share?
No, I have a few more minutes, but I do actually have a meeting as well that I have to follow up, but I'm happy to answer.
Well, I don't want to hold you back anymore. Again, I want to say, and there's nothing to prevent us from calling you back for another crowd of folks or a refresh to all of us, but I want to say thank you very much to Anna and Laura for taking the time of showing us some really, I think, very dynamic, innovative approaches to all the different training scenarios. Thank you to the Technology Review Council again. We couldn't do this without your participation, so I appreciate you all being out there and taking the time out. And if not, we will just close the meeting. Everyone stay well, enjoy the upcoming weekend. I think we are getting closer to summer from everywhere I can see in the weather patterns, so we're good. All right, stay well, everyone. Take good care.